Okay.
Okay.
Shri Guru Pyo Namah. Pranam Maharaj.
Yeah. Namaskar. Namaskar. Namaskar.
Good
Yeah.
evening, everyone in the US, and good morning to those joining us from various parts of Asia. This is our 60th session. I can't believe it's more than a year since we started. And it's a wonderful cohort of aspiring spiritual aspirants and the student Vedanta joining us. So we probably will wrap up Patanjali Yoga Sutras in a few weeks. In that context, there have been a few thoughts. Couple of people sent a text message a couple of months ago that after so many lectures, now it's all coming together for me. So that was very good to hear. And so many people are benefiting, and we are all benefiting from each other's questions. So in that context, at last Saturday at Sri Ramakrishna Jayanti, we were thinking of having a last 1 or 2 sessions at the temple, Vedanta Society in San Francisco as a satsang, so that we can all have the final summary through Maharaj there. It could happen in the first week of May or maybe in the first week of June, depending on how long it takes to finish the sutras. So please let us know on the chat sessions or on the comments on YouTube, which works better. This is just a heads up. We'll give more information in the coming weeks. So that is a little bit of the housekeeping. In addition, please make sure you share the link and like the social media icons. With that, I'll pass it to Swamiji to deliver our lecture today. Thanks, Maharaj.
So, thank you, Sanjay. Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidhyakena yoga parutam pravaram muninam Patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi stuve Patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam kartrasutrasya bhashisya kramat vivaranasya cha. We were discussing, I think we are discussing the 28th Sutra of Kaivalyapada. 28, 29, 30, these are all interrelated. In the 28th Sutra, Prasankhyane api akusiyadasya sarvatha vivekakhyadehe dharmamekha samadhi. So, when a yoga practitioner attains this higher level of proper discerning wisdom, and then when he also, along with having attained this wisdom, he also renounces the vibhutis, the powers that accrue along with this attainment, and also along the renunciation of the results of this attainment. I mean the material empirical results, we call vibhutis, powers. Then what happens is, he attains this highest and complete spiritual enlightenment, which is called vivekakhyati. And then what happens is dharmamekha samadhi. He attains a state of concentration, and that state of concentration is called dharmamekha in the yoga system. After this, the next sutra, tataha klesha karma nivritti. From the attainment of this particular kind of samadhi, which is very close to the highest asamprajnata samadhi, when you attain that highest state, all kleshas will drop away. These are the two important sutras, 28 and 29. Now coming back to subject now. What exactly happens when a spiritual seeker attains this dharma mekha samadhi? What is the impact of this dharma mekha samadhi in a yogi? First of all, and this is very important, remember, all his samskaras, tendencies, emotions will undergo a refinement. This we cannot explain in words. Our samskaras are tendencies which constitute a part of our mental system, which defines and determines how we act, how we speak, how we look upon life as a whole. All these undergo one complete transformation. And then along with that, an inexplicable serenity and calmness and quietude will emerge. Then all karmic blocks are dismantled. You get completely liberated from many, many entanglements. Now, what exactly are these entanglements? This I shall try to explain. We can only explain these entanglements only by explaining their external manifestations. Our anxieties and worries, our obsessions, our extreme likes and dislikes and infatuations, our attachments, which all create a kind of spiritual, it's a feeling of spiritual imprisonment. This happens to all people. Its most visible and most explicit manifestation is the conflict between what we actually want to do and what we are able to do. A person who has become a yogi, who has reached this viveka khyadi or dharma meka samadhi, that person, his mind, his senses, all these are under his complete control. One instance I can explain. If you read Swami Vivekananda's life, this happened when he was traveling in Europe. It so happened that somebody wondered how and why Vivekananda could remember so many things. So actually it was experimented. Somebody gave him a book. He went through some pages and that person asked many questions. He could all answer those questions. Now, this one may explain. You can, if you look at there are many YouTube videos. In fact, I did watch some of them. Normally, I don't watch YouTube, but to understand the difference between what we normally call genius or prodigal children, prodigies, students, children. Sometimes there are some cases, small little children, they can remember the names of capitals of different countries. Surprisingly, a large number of capitals they can remember. And some of them can remember the number plates of vehicles. Some of them can even remember the names of the previous presidents of the United States, all of them, so many. Now this we may consider to be a kind of prodigal phenomenon. I mean, the extraordinary power. But that is very good. Now, you put those children in another area. Those children may not be able to manifest those powers in a different field, different realm. This happens. So, some of us can do great things in certain areas in which we are interested. We have a natural tendency or interest in certain areas. People who are extremely interested in sports, they can excel in that area. But you put that person anywhere else, he can't do. So, what's the difference between a yogi and a prodigy? Yogi will be able to apply his mind and with all his concentration, powers of concentration, in whatever area he wants to concentrate upon. Yogis may not like to concentrate their mind or exercise their mental powers in certain worldly empirical areas. That's because they have already passed through these preliminary stages of yamas and niyamas. See, if you are fully established in yamas and niyamas, again, ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha, shaucha, santosha, tapaswadhyaya, isa, pranidhana. These 10 disciplines. If you are fully established in non-violence, total absence of interest in things that belong to others, not belonging to ourselves, and fully established in truthfulness, total freedom from greed and possessiveness, and internal mental purity, pure life, many of these spiritual qualities. Such a person alone can become a yogi, but because that's the very foundation. I mentioned earlier, without yamas and niyamas, if you practice extreme concentration, you may develop powers, and those powers you can use elsewhere and attain great perfection in those areas, even if you are not fully established in yamas and niyamas. But you cannot become a yogi. That's an important thing. Because after yamas and niyamas, only you practice asana, pranayama, pratyahara. These 3. And the last one, the 5th one is pratyahara, means you draw your mind away from external objects. Focus on something subtle and internal. And that leads to dharana, the first stage in actually what you call meditative, contemplative discipline. And then dhyana. And then only samadhi comes. So, naturally, a yogi may not find it worthwhile to use his powers in certain areas which may not be conducive to spiritual life. And those who actually violate this principle have not really attained yamas and niyamas, perfection yamas and niyamas. And when they show a tendency to use these extraordinary mental powers in sensory matters, sensual matters, they are actually inviting trouble. They are just about to fall over a precipice. And there are innumerable examples of yoga practitioners, in broadly speaking, spiritual practitioners who who may have attained some perfection, some development of concentration. And then, because they were not fully established in yamas and niyamas, they want power, because they are not fully established in asteya and aparigraha. And the biological desires and biological drives or terrible things are still haunting them. So their mind also gets drawn towards unpleasant objects. And then what happens? The higher you fly, the lower you fall. Dharana, dhyana may help you to fly high. But remember, before that, one should be fully established in yamas and niyamas. So instead of Viveka Khyadi or Dharmamekha Samadhi as mentioned in the 28th Sutra, what happens to them is they attain this Ekagrita. So you should also remember in this context what we actually mentioned at the beginning of Yoga Sutra, which is a distinct contribution of Vyasa. Vyasa he classifies the human mental evolution into 5 categories. That is Kshiptam, Modham, Vikshiptam, Ekagram, Niruddham. Kshipta and Mudha state, actually they belong to subnormal or abnormal states. Extreme depression, melancholia, or hyperactivity, mania, or some degree of dullness. All these are natural, and these are called kshipta and mudha. Restlessness, not able to concentrate on anything. Or total inactivity, dumbness, not able to concentrate on anything. In both cases, mind is highly disturbed. Kshipta and mudha state. The third state is vikshipta. Vikshipta states is interesting. That's true. That's the case for with the majority of beginners in spiritual life. Say when you read a book, when you do puja, when you attend the Sundays, Sabbath or any religious tradition, you feel exalted. When you listen to some lectures, you are inspired and you become highly excited in a pleasant way, in a very happy manner. You feel a lot of internal peace and happiness and serenity. So people tell me, I still remember, after puja or something, there was a great energy. Oh, I feel so wonderful watching the puja. That is good actually. That is good. But after a few days or after returning home, your mind changes. Mind again goes back to the previous state. It is called vikshipta. As a classical example I gave in the previous classes, a pendulum, the pendulum of a clock moving from one end to the other end. It doesn't stop halfway. The vikshipta state. Now when you reach the Dharmamekha Samadhi, you go beyond this vikshipta state. It becomes ekagra, focused. And it is on its way to Niruddha state. Complete Nirodha happens only when you attained Asamprajnata Samadhi, the highest state. So this state, it becomes completely concentrated on one higher ideal. And as a result, Patanjali says, Dharmamekha Samadhi. The meaning is, Mekha is cloud. Dharma here means serenity, calmness, tranquility and peace. That's what is dharma. That's the sense in which dharma is used here. And when this happens, you suddenly feel a relaxation with serenity. It is not relaxation due to inactivity, relaxation with serenity. Even we are very active, you feel total peace and calmness and tranquility, serenity. Why? Because all the nodes, because karmic blocks are all dismantled, are gone. What are karmic blocks? I mentioned this earlier. Karmic blocks can be understood only by explaining their external expression, external manifestation. The most visible, the most commonly felt karmic block is the conflict between what we want to do and what our mind permits us to do. Not the same. We want to do great things. We know we are sincere, we are earnest, work. When the time comes, somehow, for some invisible reason, we are not able to do that. Now, this is the karmic block. And what are the causes for the karmic block? That will be explained in the next sutra. So, next sutra is, please remember, Tataha Klesha Karma Nivrittihi. From this Vivekakhyadi or Dharmamekha Samadhi, this higher concentration, which is called in Patanjali system by the name Dharmamekha, it is reigning dharma. It is reigning serenity and calmness and quietude. You become fully identified with the calmness and quietude. And something very interesting that happens is our energy resources, mental energy resources, are not unnecessarily drained away. We don't feel exhaustion at the mental level. We feel a kind of energy, enthusiasm without restlessness, enthusiasm without being tired, enthusiasm with total serenity and calmness. That is Dharmamekha Samadhi. From that, what happens? Klesha Karma Nivrittihi. So the 29th Sutra is, in a way, is a continuation of 28th Sutra. When I take up Vyasa's commentary and other commentaries later, maybe next session, I will explain it more. This is very important. In fact, we are actually approaching the end of this text with the ultimate goal. Slowly, but not immediately. The Klesha Karma Nivrittihi. So what is Klesha Karma Nivrittihi? From this Dharmamekha Samadhi, we get total freedom from Klesha Karma, that is karmic blocks. From that, to get a clear picture of this, we must know what are kleshas and what are the karmic blocks. This is explained in the 3rd Sutra of Sadhanapada. So, those who don't have the book with you right now, with them right now, they can refer to this later. You should go back to Sadhanapada with the 2nd chapter in the printed books. There are many versions, but the normal version is 2nd Pada, Sadhanapada, 3rd Sutra. The 3rd Sutra of Sadhanapada should be understood properly to know the meaning of this 29th Sutra. I should explain again 29th or 28th or 30th. There may be some confusion. So you should always remember there are generally speaking 2 versions of the Kaivalya Pada. According to one version, one extra sutra is added, which is actually taken from Vyasa's commentary, which is treated as a separate independent sutra. But anyway, that is something different. So once you remember, Tataha Klesha Karma Nivrittihi. From that Dharmamekha Samadhi, you get total freedom from this Klesha Karmas. What it means is Avidya Asmita Raga Dvesha Abhiniveshaha Kleshaha. This is the 3rd Sutra of Sadhanapada. All samskaras actually vanish. That's what happens. How would we feel if we are free from the clutches of samskaras? You feel like floating in the air. That's what happens. We feel total freedom. We don't feel some strings of chains pulling us towards them. Because normal human beings, they're always, it's called every human being is a product of the circumstances under which he lives. That is true so long as you don't attain this Dharmamekha Samadhi. So once you attain this, you feel like floating in the air. The previous samskaras are not dragging you down. They are not influencing you. They are not imprisoning you. You are no more a prisoner of your circumstances. You are no longer a prisoner of your samskaras and tendencies. You become independent. So, the sutra, please remember, the 3rd Sutra of Sadhanapada, Avidya Asmita Raga Dvesha Abhiniveshaha Kleshaha. What are the kleshas? Ignorance or error, egoism, individuality, our identification with our body, mind, complex. That's all we can say. So, it's difficult to explain in English, but Asmita means, the only way we can explain is our identification with our own individual identity, body, mind, complex. Plus attachment, raga. How attachment becomes a chain that binds you. So attachment here means something different from what we normally mean by that word. Because in social situations where human relations unfortunately are dwindling or disappearing, a little bit of attachment will be highly desirable. So human relations need attachment. That is not the attachment we are talking about here. Here the word attachment, Sanskrit word is raga. The word raga is different from what we normally understand by the word attachment in the ordinary vocabulary of human relations. Here attachment means your infatuation. For example, alcoholism, drug addiction, modern times addiction to internet, addiction to computers, addictions maybe to smoking. All these are the most visible examples that one can think of when you talk about attachment. You know it's not good for us, God for you. You want to get out of it, but you cannot. So, in fact, that itself is a question mark on the concept of freedom of will. If we can do whatever we want, actually there will be no problem in the world. So, attachment is an invisible chain that binds you. I mean, it is not visible. It's not just habit formations. That's all. That's a very superficial reading in modern psychology. But actually it goes beyond that. Modern psychological concepts can only explain so long as things are related to link to our present life. But Yoga Sutra takes you beyond the present life, to previous life. Certain in obsessive liking, which you know would be totally ridiculous. Invisible chains that bind you, which you have to break off these chains. That is called raga, attachment. Dvesha, it's opposite, just the opposite of this. Extreme aversion, extreme hatred, extreme dislike, which is totally irrational. Some of them can be linked to certain abnormal problems and problems of abnormal psychology, obsessions, phobias, all these can be linked to this dvesha, or means aversion. And then certain obsessions, drug addictions and all can be linked to raga. These are different ways we can try to explain. Abhinivesha. Abhinivesha is technically in Patanjali's language, it means fear of death. Now, it takes some time for us to understand what this actually means. It expresses itself in our tendency to move away from certain things, to avoid certain things. Now, you don't say it is due to fear of death that you avoid eating bad food, unhygienic food, or filthy water. You don't drink. You can't say it's because you're afraid of death. Well, Patanjali, according to yoga psychology, the underlying fear of all other fears is a fear of death. So, in that sense, because when you fall sick, you have to go to doctors, and sometimes you may get a disease which may turn out to be incurable. So in that case, it could be a problem, it can lead to death. So this abhinivesha. Now, it is not considered to be a problem or something to be avoided. What is considered to be a problem is our mental reactions to this fear of death, abhinivesha. Trying to avoid things due to excessive concern, which again somehow linked to abnormal psychology. No, we'll go further than this. To understand these kleshas, we have to keep in mind what we discussed long ago while discussing this sutra. The mental world, according to Patanjali's system, is divided into two streams. One is called experience called bhoga in yoga language. The other is called a reaction to experience called udveka or vega. So our experience, either our experience in our own mental world or experience from external things, both can be an experience. Experience within our own inner mental world and experience coming from external world. This is bhoga. Then what is the second one? Our reaction to that experience. Our reactions to those experiences can be divided into raga and dvesha. Extreme liking, extreme aversion. So now, the underlying principle is all these cause kleshas, means they are reproductive problems, mean they produce problems in their chains one after another. Extreme infatuation, raga, extreme attachment, irrational attachment to certain things create miseries. Extreme aversion, extreme dislike, totally inexplicable or irrational aversion to certain things also will create problems. And also our tendency, excessive fear, concern, which is called abhinivesha. They all create problems. These three are the byproducts of avidya, and they become byproducts through asmita. This is the simple explanation, and they are collectively called kleshas. Now, of course, in the word klesha is defined in the Bhashya, Yoga Mani Prabha. It's a well-known book, Yoga Mani Prabha. One of the minor commentaries. I mean, klesha klishyanti karma tat phala pravartataha sa antaha purusham dukkam anuvartanti klesha. Klesha are called kleshas because they cause the fruition of karma. They bring sorrow to a person. So why they are called kleshas? Extreme liking, extreme aversion, and a tendency to avoid, and excessive concern. These things happen because of certain samskaras. Samskaras are nothing but remaining, the remnants of actions and experiences. That is samskaras. So, if you have if you had a bad experience, the bad experience produced unpleasant results. Unpleasant results produce misery. So, in future, we will always have a tendency to avoid anything that could produce that bad experience. So, it can create dvesha, one of the kleshas. Again, if there is a pleasant, happy experience, then we may have a tendency to repeat or do something that can again produce a similar or identical happy experience. Even if there is no need, we may do that. So that can become raga. So, in other words, kleshas are certain samskaras or tendencies which are repetitive, which remain accumulated in the mental system, which may express themselves whenever the circumstances become conducive to the remanifestation of the samskaras. And also we already saw that these samskaras can always manifest when the circumstances are conducive. For example, a person who has tried his best to suppress certain samskaras, right now he is keeping himself away from circumstances which can, let's say, reactivate those tendencies and samskaras. But if he happens to be in circumstances where these samskaras can ever be reactivated, he'll be in trouble. So what yoga does is, yoga actually breaks the samskaras, destroys the samskaras. In the sense, yoga practice destroys the ability of the samskaras to find fruition. A yogi can be anywhere. You know the well-known statement in Swami Vivekananda. You can find this in our website. I don't have the real quotation in front of me right now. Swamiji says, a real yogi should be able to meditate. Even what it literally implies is, even the midst of street. So Swamiji refers to the Market Street in San Francisco. If you can be in the middle of Market Street in San Francisco, still think of God, can feel complete serenity and peace, then you are a yogi. This implication you find. So that's possible only when you are completely successful, when you are successfully destroyed these samskaras. And this happens only when you attain this dharma megha samadhi mentioned in the 28th sutra of Kaivalyapada, which again is repeated in the 29th sutra, tataha. From that dharma megha samadhi, all the kleshas are completely destroyed. What are kleshas? The kleshas are nothing but samskaras. Samskaras are nothing but prisons or chains that bind you to yourself through extreme obsessive infatuation or extreme obsessive dislike or aversion or extreme obsessive anxieties or worries. Raga, Dvesha, Abhinivesha. So the 29th sutra tells you that when you attain this, you attain total freedom from klesha samskaras. Tataha klesha karma nivrittihi. So when you get freedom from samskaras, you get also freedom from karmic blocks. That's the idea behind. 30th sutra is tada. Then so this continues. So you have to always keep in mind the 28th sutra means when you attain the dharma megha samadhi, tada, at that time, sarva avarana mala apetasya jnanasya anantyat jneyam alpam. This is the 30th sutra. Tada, at that time, that state is called, it's a state of jivan mukta state, as mentioned in the Yoga Sutra, in the Vedantic literature, when you are totally free. Sarva avarana mala apedasya. All the dirt and filth are gone. What do you mean by dirt and filth? Samskaras, negative samskaras. So remember, excessive infatuation, excessive aversion, excessive concerns and worries, all of them are different forms of mala. Mala means filth, dirt. So remember, the original invocation mantra is yogena chittasya male padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yogena chittasya padena vacham malam. So malam means dirt. Through yoga, Patanjali is tried to put before you a method and mechanism to get rid of the filth and dirt for mind. So he is coming to his goal now. So tada sarva avarana malam means all avarana means wheels, the covering, the packaging, the package, all that cover, all that envelope. This, what are they? All the extreme likes and dislikes and aversions and worries and anxieties, which are different manifestations of samskaras, tendencies, which put us in the prison. All these are gone. Pedasya. And then what happens? Then that knowledge, that discerning wisdom, anantiyad, means it is actually infinite. It's a kind of infinite spiritual wisdom. Jneyam alpam. Then there is nothing more to be known. I mean, there remains nothing yet to be known. In that, it means, or rather, there is very little yet to be known. You reach a very high level of spiritual knowledge. One may ask this question. In fact, you have to somehow connect these sutras with our real mental experience. How does it help us in our life? The first thing that happens is we attain a kind of maturity and wisdom, which I would like to call, in my own language, a kind of spiritual common sense. Common sense is common. Many people they attain common sense by aging, by education, by associating with people who are more mature. That's where you can get a lot of common sense. People do have common sense as a result of the education, upbringing. Those who are born in polite circles or polite circumstances, they do have a kind of common sense. They do have it. But that common sense is only with regard to our external behavior, habits and polite behavior, words, refined words, expressions, etc. Spiritual common sense is much deeper. We become established in well-rooted in a spiritual outlook, a spiritual perspective, and that helps us to deal with the world, external world, and also our own internal world with more maturity and more wisdom. So that's what really happens to a spiritual seeker as a result of this viveka khyati. Also, we should remember, those of you who are familiar with this, karmas, we talked about karmic blocks. We talked about getting freedom from karmic blocks. Karmas are normally analyzed under three categories. That is prarabdha karma, sanchita karma, agami karma. This is the traditional Hindu, Vedantic and Yogic way of analyzing karmas. Prarabdha karmas literally mean prakashena arabdham karma prarabdham. So, karmas which are already started fruition or present birth in a specific family, in a set of circumstances, and our education or family background, all these are the result of certain karmas. Karmas here should be understood as karma phalas, means the results of karmas, means the results of karma. Karma means action. Any action can be karma. So when we use the word karma, here what we mean is not actually karma but karma phala. Phala means result. So our present life, birth, everything is a result of certain karma phalas, results of certain actions in previous life. Remember, it is not any kind of predeterminism. It is not any kind of predeterminism. Determinism can be okay with regard to a physical body, shape and size and height and weight and so on, which is related to genetic determinism. Your parents or grandparents, their height and weight and color, all these can influence your physical dimension. It's kind of genetic determinism. That's not what we are talking about here. Rather, our mental, emotional, intellectual life. All these are the results of certain actions we may have performed in previous life cycles, not in one life, but several life cycles. They already started manifesting the results. And that is the present life. But then there are many karmas which have not yet started manifesting. They are called sanchita karma. Sanchita means accumulated. in a repository. The lid is still not opened. That is Sanchita karmas. Agamya karmas are karmas which are going to happen as a result of what we are doing now and the results in future. So when you reach this state, what happens is you become totally free from the results of prarabdha karmas and also sanchita karmas. All the accumulated karmas, karmic blocks are burned, completely vanished. And then as for the karmas which are already started manifesting, as a result of which we have done this body, this embodiment, they no longer they are no longer functional. They're as good as burned, called dagdha bija nyaya. I mean, a method of explaining this means bija means seed, dagdha means fully burnt. You know, if you have seeds which are fully burnt or you fry, they don't later they cannot sprout. So these samskaras are as good as gone. At that stage, from vikshipta state to ekagra, we move towards niruddha state. So that state is called jivanmukta state in Vedanta. In yoga system, it is called this samadhi, I mean state of dharmameka samadhi. At that state, there is nothing more to be known. A yogi becomes a jivanmukta. This is the idea behind. So then tataha. So again, from there onwards, so you have to remember the previous sutra, 28th sutra should be kept in mind. From that dharmameka state, then from there you get this klesha karma nivrittihi, and again from there you reach a state where all the dirt and filth of mind are completely gone, vanished, nothing yet to be known, very little yet to be known. Nyayam alpa means very little yet to be known. You reach that advanced state. Then tataha kridarthanam parinama krama samaptihi gunanam. It's a long sutra, so the prose order is tataha kridarthanam gunanam parinama krama samaptihi. That's a prose order. From that state, all the gunas are completely reach the fruition, they are completely fulfilled. So kridartha again, but it means you should be under the sutra if you keep in mind certain words. Tataka means from then on, as a result of this kridarthanam. Kridartha actually means what we are actually trying to attain or obtain. The purpose of yoga is bhoga dapavarga, means we want to experience that we want to transcend, reach the highest transcendental experience. And as a result of this yoga practice, what happens is the gradual evolutionary process from prakriti, mahattva, ahankara, then mind, jnanendriya, karmendriya, and then tanmatras and panchamahabhutas. This is evolutionary process from prakriti. From prakriti, the cosmic intelligence, and then from the different aspects of the cosmic intelligence is called, ahankara, mind, tendencies, intelligence, senses, sense objects, all this emerge. This gradual evolutionary process, it has come to an end. And then what happens? Apavarga. We also reach the highest spiritual goal of identifying with Purusha. So the point is, you have to remember the gradual evolution. That evolution is actually reversed. Normally, who is a human being? according to Yoga Sankhya system, from Prakriti, we have already started evolving into Mahatattva, the cosmic intelligence, then to Ahankara. From Ahankara, in their Rajasiga, Tamasiga, Sattvika dimensions, mind, senses, and Tanmatra, subtle elements, and then gross elements, all this we evolve. So a normal human being, he identifies himself with matter. So let us ask the question. Suppose somebody says, I am only matter. Somebody says, there is nothing other than this body. I am born as a result of certain things and live for 100 years, and then body goes away. That's all my life, nothing more. Such a person is identifying himself with matter. Such a person is not different from a rock, a tree, or any of these things. He is not different from a rock, because rocks also are evolutes actually. If a person considers himself to be just an evolute, just a matter, a material entity, that person is not different from a rock or mountain or anything. That's important thing. But more highly evolved person will try to identify himself with something higher. I'm a philosopher. So you identify yourself with a mind or a thought or thinker. But going beyond that, when you become a mystic, you identify yourself with something far beyond the body-mind complex. There, you are actually reversing the evolutionary process. It's a reverse evolution. I mean, the evolution normally in yoga system is from Prakriti to Panchamahabhutas. Here, by the practice of yoga, by yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, we are actually going in search of our true identity. So we are actually going the opposite direction. No, I want to identify my true self. What is the true self? I am Purusha. So for that, at the first stage, you have to counter-evolve, through counter-evolution or reverse evolution. You have to start from Panchamahabhutas, the matter, then with mind, intellect, which are different evolutes of Antakarana, then to cosmic intelligence, then to Prakriti, and finally you have to detach yourself, you have to de-identify yourself with Prakriti, and then you have to identify yourself with Purusha. So Swami Vivekananda uses term dehypnotization. We have self-hypnotized ourselves into thinking that we are only this body. No, we have to dehypnotize yourself. We have to identify our true self. So, through self-control, through the practice of yamas and niyamas, through the practice of sadhana chatushtaya, sravana, manana, nididhyasana, Vedanta tradition, we are actually reversing our evolution. We are turning back and going in search of the source, the original source from where we are coming, and then finally we identify as Purusha. So that's why the 31st Sutra says, Tataha Kadarthanam Parinama Krama Samaptihi. The Parinama Krama comes to an end. Parinama means evolution. Evolution from Prakriti to Mahatattva, Ahankara, then mind, senses, and then external objects. That is descending order. That descending Parinama evolution stops, comes to an end. Then ascending Parinama, ascending evolution begins. All great spiritual teachers and spiritual seekers are trying to reverse their evolution. First, we must deny that we are this body alone. We must say no when somebody tells we are only the physical body. Human life is meant for eating and drinking and nothing more, nothing less. That is the first stage. And if we can't, and then we should go to some library, try to read at least Emerson, Whitman and Thoreau, or maybe Aristotle or somebody. And finally we should our aim should be to be able to read and enjoy and identify ourselves when we read the Sermon on the Mount or the other great teachings, parables, or Bhagavad Gita or Upanishads or great teachings of other traditions. Anything that tells us that we are something other than the body, that will help us to reverse the evolution. How to reverse the evolution? When somebody tells us that you are only the physical body, then we are actually identifying ourselves with the matter. That means a rock also exists, human body also exists. Rock may undergo changes, it may take thousands of years, maybe hundreds of years for the rocks to undergo changes. Human body may you eat organic food and take care of your body doing exercise every day, 100 years, that's all. So as matter we are insignificant. But when we do this reverse evolutionary process, we are actually going in search of our own spiritual identity, our own spiritual home, or true spiritual nature. So that is the 31st sutra says, Tataha Kdathanam Parinama Kramaha. Parinama Krama means the gradual descending evolutionary process. Samapti, it comes to an end. And then you start climbing up. Now you climb down, climbing up. And that's what yoga is all about. Now we can have interactions. You are most welcome with questions. Okay.
In the absence of Sanjay's moderation, I'll encourage David to ask his question.
Most welcome, please.
Swami,
Yeah.
if this is a kind of an age-old question, but if we are going essentially the wrong direction by becoming human, and yoga helps us evolve back to our true source.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we, once we got there, then start over again and evolve back to being an attached human? And why doesn't it cyclic?
Yeah, in fact, that question will lead you to the fundamental question: why should there be creation? If you ask the question, why should there be creation? So the traditional monotheistic religious traditions, the popular Hinduism or any other Abrahamic religions, we have no problem, because then we can say God did create this world one fine morning and one after another. That idea is found also in the popular Hindu religion. That's true, in the Puranas, etc. you find. But Vedanta and Yoga take a different approach. So there you start from cause to effect. Here we begin our inquiry with from effect to cause. More or less it's so scientific in that sense. We look around, see all these things, where do they come from, what's the meaning of our life. There we are beginning our inquiry from effect to cause, which is more scientific actually. So, if you ask the question, why should, in the first place, why should we go through this trouble of descending evolution? They say, why should create this world with all COVID, different variants and problems and insects and bacteria, wars and terrible things, That question really has no answer. In fact, that question will take you to Vedanta, straight to Vedanta. But Vedanta tells you that you're talking about creation. There is no creation. That's answered in Vedanta. So, every Srishti Vada in Vedanta, called Srishti Sudhi, means any Vedic statement about creation is meant to take you gradually to the final truth that creation is actually unreal. But if you tell the very beginning, people will laugh at you. If you say there is no creation, there is no nothing in front of people, they won't understand it. So, through a number of spiritual disciplines, your mind is conditioned to eventually admit the fact that the so-called creation is unreal. Unreal in the sense, it is not absolutely real, but is certainly not absolutely unreal. It is only relative. See, anything that is relative means anything changing. Anything changing is not absolutely real. So what is it? So the fundamental thesis in Vedanta is creation is a sport. In fact, I don't want to confuse our mainstream yoga audience with the highest flights of Vedanta, because that can create some confusion here. But I wanted to mention this point. Yoga, actually, it tells you, in the very beginning, in a yoga chitta vritti nirodha, the first sutra. Before that, Atha Yoga Anushasana. That's the first sutra. Next sutra is Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, definition of yoga. So Atha Yoga Anushasana. Atha means now onwards, henceforth, we can discuss yoga. That is the meaning of the first sutra. When do we start discussing yoga? When we reach a point, we have knocked at all other doors, then we find doors are not opening. Finally, we sit and think and meditate. Then only actually yoga makes sense. So, after exhausting all creation theories, and of course, I'm not talking about what we normally creation theory is mentioned by Richard Dawkins and others. I'm not talking about creationism versus evolutionarism. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking in that sense. But I mean, the moment you are busy with other questions, you don't turn to yoga. After exhausting all other inquiries, finally you turn your inquiry to yourself. Then only you starting, where am I coming from? What's my true nature? Am I just this body? Am I something other than this mind or intellect or anything? Now, yoga is going to be discussed. That is Atha Yoga Anushasana. So that's important. That means you are starting the inquiry from effect to cause, not from cause to effect. Okay?
All right, we're using the raise hand function, so I'll call on Sanjay next.
Yeah, please.
There is a question I think some of the people might have. There is
a
question on, it's kind of related to klesha that I've been thinking since yesterday. There is, how do yogis respond to, I'm talking about the compassion and atrocities, right? We are seeing a lot of violence here, and there is a new movie on the genocide in Kashmir that has become the talk right now when you see that. So when you go into this klesha, right, it's not dvesha, but how should people react? Is it aversion, not reacting emotionally? You talked about the word emotion in the context of klesha. So is it non-action yogic, or is it fault as well? And there are times you have to think about compassion for people.
There again. Yeah. Actually, your question is very important, very relevant, and certainly very important question. All that we can say is, how should we respond to these problems in the external world? We cannot keep ourselves away from what is happening around. We can't be inhuman. So, once we practice at least some of the early steps of yoga, we will be able to respond with compassion where it is needed, without being excited, without being too much worried, without losing a balance. That's all we can do. Yoga will help you to keep your mind in a state of harmony, equilibrium, peace and happiness. Yoga will not make you insensitive or inactive, or will not take compassion away from us. That is of course an important fact to remember. And second point should be added in this context. Yoga as a system of practice is essentially meant for contemplatives. In modern times, we have to discuss some of these teachings which are very relevant to our times in this modern 21st century IT age. there are many things from yoga that we can make use of, no doubt, very relevant. But primarily as historically speaking, yoga sutras and yoga practice essentially an individualistic contemplative practice. That background should be kept in mind. It is not meant to be practiced by society as a whole or as a congregation, but as an individual practice. That should be always kept in mind. That we can do. Actually, anyone who practices yamas and niyamas can't help being compassionate, kind-hearted. But compassionate with the mind remaining calm and quiet, not being excited. The excitement can be avoided. It should not make us insensitive. The excitement should be avoided. That's why in my previous answer I said, yoga, the philosophical, metaphysical conclusions of yoga can be logically understood in the light of Vedanta only. That's why Swamiji links yoga with Vedanta in his interpretation. That's because he was explaining to Western world, which is not that familiar with the traditional teachings of a real yoga practitioner. So he had to link yoga with Vedanta. So how to, what is the nature of my mind? What is the purpose of my life? Why am I disturbed by thoughts and emotions and feelings, samskaras, in the mental system? How can I remain calm and quiet? These must have been the questions that must have influenced Patanjali and others. So the purpose is, malam, yogena chittasya, chittasya malam, mean the dirt and filth of mind, to get rid of them. What are these things? Emotions and feelings which disturb me. Malami means something which to be got rid of. Trash. That's what mala means. Something to be got rid of, to be removed, to be dispensed with. These disturbing thought currents and anxieties and worries. So, Patanjali's system will help us to remain calm and quiet without being insensitive or inactive. Will help us to face problems of different sorts. That's all. Patanjali doesn't directly say anything related to social or cultural issues, because those subjects were never the topics discussed either in Patanjali's original sutras or in the long lineage of teachers like Vajaspati, Vijnana Bhikshu, Bhoja and others, Harihara Ananda, even who lived very recently, 150 years ago, 200 years ago. So they never linked yoga with any social or cultural issues. Okay, please. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question.
Swamiji, before I call on Yogi, I'd like to follow up on Sanjay's question, and that is, it occurs to me that most children and young adults at some point start to develop these existential questions. It seems very natural for them to ask about what's going on with this life, with this world. It comes as a shock as their consciousness develops, their awareness of issues. And it seems to be a natural thing. At some point, this hypnosis, the Maya, does seem to descend. And a question that comes up a lot is why? What's the utility, if there is one, of the Maya to separate us from the Purusha?
Yeah. I mean, what's the question?
My question is, how do we lose the thread so easily in our young adulthood that we would get hypnotized so that we would have to be dehypnotized?
Yeah, there again, at least the yoga literature directly doesn't deal with this question. Yoga literature is important, relevant because of its analysis of emotions and feelings, the internal world of human mind. So that's why I mentioned earlier, Patanjali's system is not complete in its metaphysical superstructure. So I have found some people in the comment section, which I don't normally read. Recently I happen to know Vedantists don't give importance to yoga. See, they see the practitioners of yoga. They think that yoga means hatha yoga, physical yoga. We should remember, maybe they will be able to understand from this answer. We should remember that all great spiritual teachers and spiritual seekers were practitioners of yoga, Ashtanga yoga. So, can you mention one great teacher who was not non-violent, who was not free from greed and external desires, impurities and so on? So, they should remember that yamas and niyamas are not technical Sanskrit terms. They are the human qualities, human disciplines, which are found, which were practiced by spiritual seekers and teachers in all traditions. Those traditions do not call these disciplines with the word yoga. That's why the founder of this temple, where we are holding this class, Swami Tattwamayananda, who founded the first Hindu temple outside Asian continent, in the Western world, he got a painting of Jesus done. Jesus a yogi, sitting a yogi. Now Jesus is portrayed as a yogi. Sri Ramakrishna also said Jesus was a yogi. Does it mean that Jesus was practicing hatha yoga every day or Shirshasana or something? No. Wherever you practice self-restraint, non-violence, purity, contemplative nature, you are practicing yoga. That's all. This is a fact. So yoga is an umbrella term for spiritual contemplative culture and practices. So that's why if you go for a metaphysical set of theories from yoga, you won't find much in yoga system. People are looking, they think that yoga is a separate school of philosophy. No, yoga, from a metaphysical point of view, yoga system is not very strong, actually.
So only linked to Vedanta Otherwise, the Dharma Mega is.
No, Dharma Mega Samadhi does make sense. But I tell you, okay, can I tell you? I shall few more things I will tell you. Yoga system derives its metaphysics from Sankhya. In Sankhya system, the Prakriti Purusha concept comes from Sankhya. Okay, they took everything from Sankhya. In Sankhya system, Purusha is self-effulgent, but inactive. Prakriti is not effulgent. Jada is dead. I mean, it has no energy, nothing, but it is active. It is the source of all evolution. So Prakriti cannot see because it has no effulgence. Purusha can see, but it has no legs to walk. So Prakriti sits on the shoulders of Purusha, and Purusha sitting on Prakriti's shoulders tell Prakriti walk this way, and you walking. So the Prakriti, so that you find that's the beginning, at the very beginning of Sankhya system you find Sankhya Karika, Ishwara Krishna Sankhya Karika. So, but then if you go, people who don't read this, fortunately people don't read Sankhya Karika, so they won't understand the meaning of they don't understand what I mean when I say that the metaphysical superstructure of yoga system is not so very profound. It is somewhat not infallible. They don't understand. Fortunately, they don't read Sankhya Karika, because Sankhya Karika gives the picture. One person sitting on the shoulders of other. So really, the one sitting on the shoulders, he can see because his Purusha can effulgent. And Prakriti can walk but can't see. So they put together. And Prakriti is playing this dance, this play before Purusha to infatuate, to entertain Purusha. This kind of things you find. I think these must have been some kind of a allegory or more like a parable. But going beyond that, when you read the Sankhya system or even Yoga system, you find some very profound psychological truths and very revealing psychological insights you get in the Yoga Sutras. That's the uniqueness of Yoga system. Okay. Please continue.
Please go ahead, Yogi.
Yeah, please continue.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yeah.
Just one comment and then a question. To Sanjay's point about compassion, there is a sutra.
Yeah.
Maitri, Karuna,
Mudita, Ubeksha. Yeah. That's that. In fact, this again, that is true. Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Ubeksha. Punya, Nam, it comes like that. So the point is, but again, it is limited to individual spiritual life. How we should interact with persons whom we may encounter in our life. Those who are fellow practitioners, fellow spiritual aspirants, we should be friendly with them. And those who are not so well informed, who are behind this, we should not belittle them. We should be compassionate, karuna. Mudita means santosha, means happiness. When we meet some spiritual seekers who are more advanced than us, we should not be jealous. We should be happy. We should be happy to associate with people who are more advanced than us in spiritual life. Upeksha, those whose association can create problems in our own spiritual pursuit, we should keep a long distance from it. So as you mentioned, Karuna is mentioned here, no doubt about it. But Karuna, here it is not used in the sense of compassion to social or cultural issues, but rather is used as a mechanism that we use in our interaction with people around, so that wrong associations will not create problems in our own spiritual practices. That's the idea behind it. So,
the question follows, Maharaj.
Please.
Karma theory says every action has an opposite reaction. In Kaivalya happens, enlightenment happens if it breaks this law. Is that kind of...
No, karma, every action produces opposite reaction. That may be okay with Newton, or maybe in modern times in each other physicists. But that should not be read along with the doctrine of law of karma. Law of karma means you do something, it produces a result. It's neither opposite nor pleasant. It depends upon the nature of the results, depends upon the nature of actions. Equal and opposite reaction, that should not be read into yoga system or law of karma. That's okay with physics or Newton or whatever. So here, whatever we do, it produces one visible result. If you give money to somebody who is in need of help, that person is benefited on the one hand, and if you give $100, you have $100 less with you. That is understandable. Okay, that's one. Now, after that act of charity is done, what happens, your mind begins to evolve. Your mind is benefited. You generate some spiritual current, or spiritual vibration, spiritual residual effect. It's called vritti. Any good act of charity or kindness or compassion will help us to move a little forward in our spiritual life. So that is very important. So again, this is aparigraha. Aparigraha is something important, means not receiving gifts. Second point is, if you receive something from somebody, according to Yoga Sutras, you take from that person a little bit of whatever samskaras he has got. That's an interesting thing. I think this is more or less true in our life, but you cannot verify as we verify some scientific laws. If we go on taking things, getting help from others, even there is no need, if you, too much of dependence, if you become a parasite, that actually hurts our own life. In that sense, that takes away our freedom. That's important to remember. So remember, the karma produces its result. Its result is neither opposite nor positive. It depends upon the action itself. Is independent of either being opposite or pleasant. It is linked to the karma itself. That's the idea behind.
But even with that interpretation, Maharaj, if karma palas can be escaped at some point, doesn't it break the law?
You are right. You are right. Every rule has its own exceptions. Even in law, there are, a person's sentence can be altered. Good behavior, 8 years imprisonment can be reduced to 4.5 years for good behavior. So does it mean that you are actually violating the constitution, violating the verdict of the justice system? No. So like that, in fact, you have actually raised an important subject, which is important in even Advaita Vedanta. Shankaracharya explains in his bhashyas the mechanism of, you'll be surprised, kripa, grace of God, that comes from a most unlikely source, Shankaracharya's commentary. That shows the comprehensiveness and the completeness of Shankaracharya's system. So while talking about this prarabdha karma. Prarabdha karma means prakashena arabdham karma, something which has already started manifesting. So the example is taken from an archer who is shooting an arrow. An archer is shooting an arrow at a target. The arrow had left the bow. It is on its flight towards the target. So you may assume, well, the arrow had to hit the target. Okay, understand. Now, suppose a strong wind blows, or unexpectedly an obstacle appears blocking the flight of the arrow towards these targets. Then also the arrow will not reach the target. The arrow doesn't have to hit the target. It has to exhaust its velocity. That depends upon the force with which the archer has released the arrow. Similarly, coming back to karma. Suppose a person has done something very unpleasant, undesirable, and is, according to the law of karma, he has to face the consequences. Suppose he does some good deed, then the intensity of the results of his bad karmas also will be reduced. And again, Holy Mother says, if you practice spiritual disciplines, which also includes charity, compassion, kindness, acts of compassion, kindness, etc., then also the arrow doesn't have to hit the target. If you are destined to be bitten by a cobra, you may still be bitten, but not by a cobra, maybe a water snake. If you are destined to be bitten by a water snake, you may be bitten by an ant. So the intensity of what you are bound to suffer, what you are bound to experience, the intensity will be radically reduced depending upon your good actions and also the grace of God. Grace of God can alter the impact of prarabdha karmas. And this, so he says, prarabdha, Shankaracharya's statement comes like, prakshana arabdham nadu sunishchidam. That means it is not inevitable, it is not invariable that you have to suffer for your karmas. If you do some good deeds, if you do something compassionate, if you get the grace of God or some spiritual personalities, the intensity of the sufferings that you are destined to undergo will be reduced radically. So remember, karma theory is not determinism. It is not fatalism. It is not predeterminism. I mentioned earlier, determinism functions only as genetic determinism, not in our life cycles. Genetic determinism is again, it depends upon your genetic heritage, DNA. So remember, karma, love karma is rather the opposite of determinism. There is an element of flexibility and also there is an element of inevitability. Both are present in the law of karma. I hope, Yogi, I hope it's clear.
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Sunil, you had your hand up. If you're still there, can you unmute?
Yes. So, it was a really nice session. I learned a couple of things. I have the question, Swamiji.
Yeah.
When a person is insane or he is a mad person, the Lord doesn't punish him. Because if he's a mad person, if a punishment is given, it doesn't make a sense to him.
Yeah.
What about when it comes to the karma? If a person is insane or mad, how the karma is going to, because he is not going to understand anything.
Yeah.
Doesn't make a sense to him. So why he should be punished?
No, yeah, that's true. Even insane person of course, he may not be punished if he is clinically diagnosed with insanity. True. But then he will be sent to some institutions where he will be cured, he will have to undergo treatment, So that is not a very pleasant experience. It's certainly better than getting a death sentence or something. But still, he will be certainly institutionalized. So, when a person is clinically insane, then he is not doing something with full awareness of what he is doing. So, there is that element. As I mentioned earlier, karma doctrine contains an element of determinism, but in the sense there is an element of invariability, inevitability, but also flexibility. I mentioned just now while answering the previous question. Just like the arrow which has left the bow, it doesn't have to hit the targets. If a strong wind blows, it could be deflected. The arrow could be directed in another direction. It will miss the targets. The arrow only has to exhaust its velocity. That's all. So in this case also, this man will have to undergo the results of his actions in the sense of being institutionalized or maybe subject to some treatment. Okay, he won't be just left free. No, never. Then you can say it may be a violation of the law of karma. But he will have to be treated as a patient, which again won't be a very pleasant experience. So that's understanding.
Another question is Yoga Sutra anywhere tells about Maya?
No, Yoga Sutra doesn't say about Maya. No, it never occurs anywhere. Not even the commentaries. No, never. Maya is certainly Maya. The word Maya occurs in the Vedas even in the Upanishads. And Srila Shankaracharya, who developed Maya as a doctrine to explain the phenomenon of the infinite Brahman appearing to have become this finite world. So for that Shankaracharya used, it is neither real nor unreal. Sannapya sannapi bhyatmigano, bhinnapya bhinnapya bhyatmigano, Sangapya Sangapi Vyatmigano, Mahadbhudani Vachane Rupa. So there are certain things which are beyond words. It's a great mystery. You cannot say it is real in the sense it is absolutely real. You cannot say it is unreal in the sense it is absolutely unreal. So it is neither real nor unreal. We experience it so long as we are not aware of its delusional nature. So all this you find in the Maya doctrine is in no way connected to yoga system. So thank you. We have, I think, I'm very happy with the questions, and we expect more questions in the next class.
Thank you very much, Swami.
Thank you. Most welcome. Most welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Namaskar, Swamiji.
Namaskar.
Thank you, Swami.
Namaskar.
Hariya.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Namaskar.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah. Namaskar. Namaskar.
Thank you, Maharaj.